And now we're going to start working on some basic shaders. And in the first part of this, we're going to work on things like rubber and metal and plastic. So I'm going to go to this layer down there where I have a couple of objects already. I have our shadow planes and I have the interior models here. So we're going to go over the basic materials for these real quick. Now, if you didn't want to make these materials yourself, feel free to import the materials from the Corvette file in your resources folder. You're free to use those materials however you want. And if you still want to follow along, I'm going to give you a quick breakdown of the basic shaders in this chapter. Then when we get to more complex stuff like the tire and the car paint, things are going to be a little bit more in-depth. So with the shadow plane selected, I'm going to go over to this window here that I've switched over to the node editor. And you can see the setup is very basic. I just have a diffuse node on the left set to black, so it's literally reflecting no light at all, and that's connected to the output. So if I press Shift and Z over the 3D view, you can see that it's pitch black. All right, so that takes care of that. Let me just press H to hide it, and let's work on the interior now. Now, if I right-click on that to select it, you can see this setup is also very basic. I'm using Blender's new principled BSDF shader just because I wanted some extra reflections as well instead of just diffuse. So for this, I didn't change many settings. I changed the base color to a darker gray. I set all the values to 0.02. And let's see what else. I turned specular down just so it was less reflective. Remember that we just created these to give us a hint of a silhouette inside of the car. So I want it catching some of the light to help with that silhouette, but not a whole lot. So I turned the reflection down and I turned the roughness up to 0.3. And all the other settings I think are default. So that's all I did for that. And I applied that to the chairs, the steering wheel, and the whole shell of the thing. All right, let me press Alt and H to bring back the shadow planes. And that'll do it for those two shaders. So let's move on to the next layer. Let me click on that. And in this layer, I have all the rubbers and plastics, so that's what we're going to do now. Now, let me right-click on the mud flap to select that, and we're going to start off with the basic rubber. Let me go over to the material settings. So I've got this called rubber-black, and just in case you didn't know, you can change the color of things in the viewport by scrolling down to the settings panel and changing the viewport color. All right, so the rubber settings are also very basic. In fact, I kept most materials pretty basic for this, but I paid more attention to more complex and more important things like the car paint and the tire. But for this, I just changed the base color down to 0.008 down the line for a really dark gray. And what else? I turned roughness up to 0.35, and that's it, I think. Yep. And that just gave us a real dull, darker gray object with just a hint of reflection like that, but really rough. All right, now with that selected, what I'll do is I'll go to Select Menu and choose to select all linked materials. So these are all the materials I gave the rubber material to. So let me press / on the numpad and go to local view. And I'll go through one by one just to show you where I applied this. So the mud flap in the front, obviously. So I'll select that and hide it. And the wheel well and mud flaps. And also the air stem for the rim, or for the tire, I should say. And the little cap at the top of the calipers also have rubber. And I gave the rubber material to the area down here that has the windshield wipers. And also for the rubber for the windshield wipers. Now there's that rubber strip at the top of the windshield, so I gave that the rubber material. And the 3 rubber strips around the back side window there. And also the back mud flaps and the back air stem and caliper caps. All right, let me press Alt and H to unhide that. I'll press / to go back to global view, and now we'll work on the plastic. So let me go up here and I'll select that plane object right there. That's probably going to be the easiest thing to apply the plastic to because it has the most surface area, so we'll be able to get a better idea of what it looks like. Now let me press / on the numpad to go into local view, and I'll show you what the final product looks like, and then we'll break it down. So let me press Shift and Z to get a render going. Let me catch the light just right like that. So you can see we have fine bump pattern in there, but there's also some waviness going on. So we're going to basically use 2 noise textures to create these overlapping bumps. All right, let me slide this over now and get a better idea of what this node setup looks like. So there it is, the material plastic, black, bumpy, small. And I started things off by adding in a principled node here. And I changed the base color to a dark gray with all the values at 0.022. And then I increased the roughness to 0.3. So basically, I just made it dark gray and I blurred the reflections a little bit. Then I added in all these nodes down here for the bumpiness. Now the top 2 nodes deal with the really tiny fine bumps, and then the bottom two nodes deal with the larger, wavier areas. Now at the start of everything over here is a texture coordinate node, and this node is used to define how textures are applied to the surfaces. And we have various options here, including UV mapping, but we're going to go with object coordinates because it just seems like procedural textures are applied to the surfaces more consistently when you use object coordinates. So I plugged in object coordinates to a noise texture node up here, and this is what gives us our bumpy pattern. And I changed the scale up to 5,000, and that gave us our really fine bumps right there. And I have detail set to 1. Detail is basically just the texture of the bumpy surface of the noise. Now if I press Control, Shift, and left click on the noise texture node, you can see what the noise texture looks like. And let's get an idea of what the factor socket looks like. That's basically just the black and white values of the node. So I'll press Control, Shift, and left click on that again, and there we go. So there's basically our bump map. And if those hotkeys aren't working for you, make sure you enable the Node Wrangler add-on that we did in the user preferences chapter. So right now we have too much contrast there, and it's going to lead to way too much bump. It's going to be kind of out of control. So we need to minimize that. So I plugged the factor socket there into a math node here set to multiply. And I multiplied it by a very low number, 0.002. And let me hold Control, Shift, and left click on that to preview it. And you can see it's almost invisible. But you do see a little bit of a noise pattern there. So with that much less contrast, we're going to have very small bumps now, which is what we need for this fine bumpy surface. Now if you want to reset things and plug the principled node back into the material output, just hold Control, Shift, and left click on the principled node, and it plugs it back in. So let me zoom out a little bit. And let's work on the bottom two nodes now, which are for the larger noise pattern that gives us more of a wavy surface. And you can't really tell the difference in that. I mean, the effect is kind of subtle. But if I were to increase the strength of this, you can see the wavy pattern kind of showing through a lot more now. But I want to keep that as a subtle effect. So I'll keep that at 0.004. So let me just break down these nodes. They're pretty much the same as the ones we have up here. The left noise texture here has a scale of 100 though, which gives us a larger noise pattern. And it has detail of 2, which just adds a little bit more texture to how the noise looks. And I connected the factor socket of that to another math node set to multiply. Multiplied it by a slightly higher value this time, so it was more prominent. So I multiplied that by 0.004. And now what we need to do is mix both of these noise textures together. So I've connected both of these to another math node set to add. So it's going to add all the lighter values from the nodes down here on top of the nodes up here. So if I hold Control, Shift, and left click on that, it's going to take the lighter areas you see here and add it on top of this texture here. And it's all going to come out very subtle in the end. But you can see now it has waves and a little bit of bumpiness. And that's what we use as our bump map. And I plug that right into the displacement socket of the material output. So let me hold Control, Shift, and left click on the principled node to get that back in. And that's it. So that is our plastic shader. And now let me show you the things that use this material. All right, let me go over here and press / on the numpad to go back to global view. And let me slide that over. And let me go to Select, Linked, and Material to select all the objects that use this material. Then I'll go back into local view. So all of our diamond meshes for the vents use this material. So I'll press H to hide that. And obviously the object we just worked with. And then also this backplate object here behind the, what would you call them, the teeth of the grill. And the diamond meshes for the front fender vents. And the shoulder vent objects right here, including the diamond mesh and its border. And then we'll go to the back of the car. And both of these, or all of these vent objects, including the vent next to the tail lights, and the vent and its border at the left and right of the bumper. All right, let me press Alt and H to unhide everything. I'll press / to go back to global view, and that'll do it for these two materials then. All right, let's keep things rolling. Let me go to my next layer where I have all the objects that have basic metal materials isolated. So let me select the Stingray here. We'll start with the basic chrome. So I've given this a material called metal-chrome, and let's take a look at the settings for that. So very basic, it's just a principled node set to a base color of white, a metallic value set to 1, so it's a full metal material, and roughness set to 0, so we have completely crisp, sharp reflections. So we press Shift and Z, and well, you know what chrome looks like, but there you go. So very basic material, but it gets the job done. And let me show you all the objects that have this material now. So I'll select all linked materials and then press / on the numpad to go into local view. Alright, so we'll start at the front of the car. We have this little strip here that goes on the front of the bumper, on front of the grille I mean. So that has chrome, and I'll press H to hide it. Then up here in the headlights, this is the daytime running lamp area, and all of these are the little dividers that we place between the bulbs in the tweaks chapter. So that's got chrome, so I'll press H to hide that. And these are the chambers for the blinkers on the side of the headlight. So they're chrome. And now we're on the side of the car where the wheel well is and the little light strip we have there. So the chambers in there are chrome as well. And obviously the Stingray logo. And I've given the mirror chrome material as well, since in this case they're basically the same. Just something with perfect reflections, basically. Now I'm heading around to the back of the car. Let me full screen this. So here's the back wheel well light chamber as well. And this is the chamber behind the red blinkers on the tail, on the back bumper. Then we have the Corvette logo. And right here in the tail lights, we have the light chambers in the back. They're both chrome. And then the slopes inside of the tail light lenses. They're chrome too. And then finally, the chamber right here on that light that's on top of the trunk. Alright, let me press Alt and H to unhide everything. And that does it for the basic chrome. So let me press / on the numpad to go back to global view. And I'll press H to hide all of those objects. And let's work on something else now. So let's keep things rolling with other chrome materials. So let me zoom in to the headlight shell here. And I'll right click on that to select it. And let me get out of full screen. Now I've given this a material called Metal Chrome Dark. Now these are actually black on the actual Corvette Stingray, at least typically. I didn't think that looked quite as good as more reflective metal material, but I also didn't think a fully bright chrome worked that well on this. So that's why I gave it basically a chrome material and just made it a little bit darker. So this has a principled node, and I turned the base color down to 0.38 for all the values. And metallic is set to 1 just like chrome, and roughness is set to 0 just like chrome. So that's all that is, and I use this for the headlight shell, the main light shell right here, and also the shells for the blinker lights over here. So let me just hide all of those, and that does it for that material. Now let me go back over to the mufflers back here, and I'll right click on them to select them. And I've given these a material called Metal Chrome Rough 0.2. Now the name says it all. It's our regular chrome material, but I increased the roughness value to 0.2, so it's a little bit less reflective. So let me press Shift and Z and get a preview of that. I thought the rougher reflections just looked a little bit better on that type of object back there. Alright, so let me see what other objects have that. Let me select Link Materials, and I'll press / on the numpad to go into local view. And we know the mufflers have it, but also all of these spokes that are in between the brake discs, they also have that rough chrome value. And all of the nuts and bolts as well as the nut right here that's at the base of the air stem, and then the nut right here that's on top of the calipers. And I think that's it. Let me just go over to the front, make sure there's nothing else. Nope, that's it. Okay. So let me press Alt and H to unhide that, press / to go back into global view. I'll press H to hide them, and we're working our way down the list. So let's work on the brake hubs now. So let me right click on that to select it, and then I'll press / on the numpad to go into local view. And just for the time being, let me reactivate subsurf modifier in viewport. So I'll go over to the modifiers, and I'll make that visible again. I turned off visibility for subsurf for some objects just to speed things up in the viewport. And let me press Shift and Z and get a preview of this. So this is basically like a chrome material, but it's got a tint of orange to it, and also this bumpy pattern on the surface. Now this material is called Brake Hub. This is the only object that has this material. And I started off with the principled node, and I gave it a base color with a value of 0.687 red, 0.612 green, and 0.555 blue, just to give it a bit of an orange tint. And I set metallic up to 1 since it's a metal object. Turn roughness to 0.3, and I believe that's it for that. Yeah, it is. Then I also added a noise texture, and just like with the, the plastic, I gave it object coordinates and a scale of 3000, so we have really fine bumps, and bump detail of 2, which just made them a little bit more textured looking. Now that amount of bump by default would have been way too much, so we have to lessen that. So I ran the factor value of the noise texture, which is basically the black and white value, into a math node set to multiply, and I multiplied it by a value of 0.002. And multiplying it by such a low number, it gives us a really dim result with very little contrast, and that gives us these very slight bumps and this textured surface. Alright, and I plug that into the displacement socket of the material output, and that is all there is to it. So this material is only used on the brake hub, so you only have to apply it to that. And let me go over to the modifiers and I'll turn off visibility of that for the viewport. Now I'll press / to go back to global view, and let me select all the hubs and hide them. So I'll go to select linked material and press H to hide them. Alright, so I think that'll do it for this chapter. I'm going to split these up since there's quite a few basic materials. And in the next chapter we'll work on the rims, other metals, and glass.